The rain had been falling for hours by the time I finally heard the knock. A steady Portland drizzle had turned into a full storm, the kind that blurred the world outside my studio windows into streaks of trembling light. I stood barefoot in the middle of my tiny apartment surrounded by half-packed boxes, a forgotten cup of tea cooling on the counter, my resignation letter still open on my laptop screen as if it wanted to remind me I had actually done it. I had quit Helion. I had walked away from the job that had shaped the last 4 years of my life. I had stepped outside the glass tower and left everything behind because staying had cost me too much. I thought tonight would be quiet, maybe even peaceful in that raw and aching way that comes after ripping out a part of your life. I never expected anyone at my door. I especially did not expect him. The first knock was soft, almost questioning, like whoever stood on the other side had not fully decided whether to stay or turn away. I frowned. No one should know my address except my landlord, my sister in Montana, and maybe 3 coworkers who had probably already moved on with their lives. I hesitated, the air thick with the smell of wet pavement drifting in through the cracked window. Then came the second knock, firmer, urgent. I took a breath and crossed the room. The hallway light outside my door cast a faint glow beneath the frame, a trembling shadow visible in the space between the threshold and the floor. My pulse flickered. I turned the lock and pulled the door open. For a moment, I could not breathe. Adrian Vale stood on my doorstep. Helion Systems CEO, industry legend, the man who built an empire out of broken code and impossible ambition, the man whose smallest nod in a meeting could make a room hold its breath. The man who had looked at me for 2 years with an expression I could never fully decipher. And now he was here, at my door, in the rain. His hair was soaked, darkened to nearly black from the storm. His white shirt clung to him, edges dripping onto the welcome mat I had been meaning to replace for months. He looked nothing like the perfectly composed figure who owned every boardroom he stepped into. His chest rose and fell as if he had run here, or as if he had been standing in the rain long enough to gather the courage to knock. "Maeve," he said, and my name on his lips sounded different. Not like a CEO addressing an employee, not like a superior summoning a subordinate in a hallway. It sounded fragile, human. I gripped the doorknob because my hand had begun to tremble. "Adrian?" I managed my voice thin. "What are you doing here?" His throat worked as if he had swallowed something sharp. "You quit your job, but I am not losing you." The words hit me harder than the storm wind that rushed through the open door. I stared at him, stunned, unable to compute the meaning behind what he had just said. Not losing me. Not losing me. As what? As an employee, as a colleague, as something else. My heart pounded an uneven rhythm. "Adrian, you should not be here." I stepped back instinctively, trying to put space between us because something about this version of him, stripped of his usual armor, terrified me more than any boardroom confrontation ever could. His eyes searched my face, rainwater dripping from his lashes. "I know I should not be," he said quietly, "but I could not let today be the end of everything. Whatever thing. He took one step forward. Not crossing the threshold, not invading my space, but close enough that I could feel the heat of him beneath the cold rain. "Maeve, please, let me come in, just for a moment." I looked at him, then really looked at him, and for the first time in all the years I had known him, he looked scared. Not of losing a deal or failing an investor. Scared of losing something else entirely. I swallowed hard and stepped aside. He entered slowly, as if worried I might change my mind. The apartment felt smaller instantly, his presence filling every corner. The dim lamp cast a warm glow on his soaked clothes, making him look somehow out of place and painfully real at the same time. I closed the door, gently shutting out the storm, but not the tension between us. He stood there, dripping onto my hardwood floor, staring at the boxes scattered around the room. "Is this why you did not answer your phone?" he asked softly. "You were packing." I folded my arms across my chest. I was preparing. For what? For leaving all of it behind. The job, The pressure, the lies, the failure, and maybe even this city. The words slipped out before I could stop them, and I saw the way they struck him, like a physical blow. His jaw tightened. "Maeve," he said my name again, but this time it cracked slightly at the edges. I need to say something. No, I lifted a hand to stop him. Not until you tell me why you are here, why you came to my home, why you think you're losing me. He exhaled a long, uneven breath, the kind you make when you have been holding something in so long it hurts to release it. "Because today was wrong," he said. "Because letting you walk away felt like watching something irreversible happen. And because he paused, lifting his eyes to mine with a vulnerability that made my stomach twist because I should have said something months ago. My pulse stuttered, said what I whispered. He took another breath, then looked around my cluttered apartment as if searching for the right place to set down the weight of what he carried. But his next words did not come. Instead, he met my eyes with a depth that made the room tilt. "Maeve," he murmured, "I am sorry. For everything." I stepped back, needing space, needing air, needing distance from the storm swelling between us. "Adrian, this is too much. Too sudden. Too late." He closed his eyes briefly as if bracing himself. Then he said the words that froze me completely. "Let me tell you how it all began long before the storm at my door." 6 months before Adrian Vale stood at my door, dripping rain onto my floor. I was sitting under the harsh fluorescent lights of Helion Systems, trying to remember how to breathe. It had been one of those days where everything felt slightly tilted, as if the world had shifted a few degrees without warning, and I was the only one who noticed. The office hummed with the low mechanical buzzing of servers and the clicking of keyboards, the usual soundtrack of a tech company chasing impossible deadlines. I stared at the wireframe sketches on my monitor, but the shapes would not stay still. They blurred, wavered, doubled. I blinked hard, willing my vision to clear, but the exhaustion clung to me like heavy dust refusing to shake off. The past year had carved pieces out of me in small, sharp ways. At first, I had told myself it was normal that everyone burned out a little in tech, especially at a place as relentless as Helion. But burnout had turned into something darker. Something that chewed through my confidence and sleep and sense of self until I barely recognized the reflection in my bathroom mirror each morning. The breaking point had not been Helion, though. It had been Noah, my boyfriend of 3 years. The man I thought I would marry. The man who packed his clothes into a suitcase on a Monday morning and told me with the calmest voice I had ever heard that he could not do this anymore. "You are always working, Maeve," he said, not unkindly, just detached. "You are always tired. You put everything above us. Maybe tech fits you better than I do." Then he left. Just like that, not even shutting the door all the way behind him. I stood there barefoot on the hardwood floor, staring at the thin line of light seeping through the cracked door, and wondered if this was what it felt like for a future to collapse. I tried to keep myself together afterward. I threw myself into work thinking if I focused hard enough I would not notice the silence of my apartment, or the empty side of the bed, or the plants dying on the windowsill because I forgot to water them. But grief seeped through the cracks, and work only made everything worse. Helion had always been intense, but that year it became brutal. The company was preparing for its IPO, which meant every project was tied to a countdown clock, and every mistake felt catastrophic. Leadership preached optimization and efficiency and restructuring, which translated to cutting half of my UX research team and doubling my workload. I was expected to deliver 3 projects with 2 people. Meetings stretched late into the evening. Slack messages came in at 2 in the morning. My weekends disappeared into whiteboards and prototype reviews. My stomach lived on coffee and whatever granola bar I found in my desk drawer. Still, I told myself I could handle it. I always had. Until the meeting that broke me. It was supposed to be a routine cross-department review in the big glass conference room on the 24th floor overlooking the river. I had barely slept the night before. My temples throbbed with the familiar ache of an oncoming migraine and my hands trembled slightly as I set my laptop on the table. The CTO, Marcus, arrived 10 minutes late, tossing his jacket over a chair and flipping through the report I sent without actually reading it. He cleared his throat, then launched into a speech about delays and inconsistencies and flawed user testing metrics. Every sentence felt sharp, like he was carving his frustration into the air. "The data is unusable," Marcus said, raising his voice just enough for it to sting. "This sets the entire product timeline back." The room went still. I felt heat rush to my cheeks. That data was not mine. The raw logs had come from another division, but I had trusted the file when it landed in my inbox at midnight. I had trusted the system. I opened my mouth to explain, but Marcus continued. "This falls under UX research, which means it falls on you." I froze. Around the table. Heads lowered, eyes averted, no one brave enough to speak against a senior executive. My pulse roared in my ears. I tried again to speak, to defend myself, to point out it was not my mistake, but the words tangled in my throat. The walls seemed to tilt. My chest tightened. My vision narrowed. The room grew unbearably loud and unbearably quiet at the same time. And then I felt it. A crushing wave of panic rising fast, squeezing the air from my lungs. I gripped the edge of the table. My nails dug into the wood. I told myself to breathe, but my body refused to listen. "Panic attack," my brain whispered. But the realization only made it worse. Someone asked me if I was all right, but their voice sounded underwater. Marcus frowned, annoyed. "If you cannot handle the pressure, perhaps we need someone who can." Something inside me snapped, not loudly, not dramatically. More like the quiet tear of fabric that has been stretched too thin for too long. I stumbled out of the room, bumping into a chair on the way out. I barely made it to the hallway before I collapsed to my knees, hands clutching my chest, trying desperately to drag in air. The tiles were cold beneath me. My vision blurred, and then suddenly I was not alone. A figure knelt beside me, blocking the harsh overhead lights. Maeve. His voice murmured calm, steady grounding. It was Adrian Vale, the CEO who rarely left his top-floor office, the man who looked too busy to notice anyone. But he noticed me. He did not touch me at first, just stayed close, speaking in a low voice, guiding me through slow breaths until the ringing in my ears eased. After a while, he pushed a bottle of water into my hands and waited silently while I tried to steady myself. When I finally looked up, his expression held no judgment, only something I could not place, then something like concern. "You should not have been put in that position," he said quietly. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe someone saw what was happening to me. But the truth was simple. It was too late. Something fundamental inside me had already cracked. That day was the beginning of the end, long before I was ready to admit it. Helion Systems sat on the edge of the Willamette River like a monument to ambition, its mirrored windows reflecting the Portland skyline and the ceaseless flow of water below. To outsiders, it looked like a temple for innovation, a place where genius thrived and the future was engineered floor by floor. To insiders, especially those of us who had been there long enough to see behind the glass, it was something more complicated. It was brilliance sharpened into pressure. Creativity fused with exhaustion. Hope wrapped tightly around fear. I had joined Helion 4 years earlier, starry-eyed and certain I was stepping into a dream. The company was already famous for building adaptive robotic systems and predictive AI models that reshaped entire industries. Their recruitment videos featured clean labs, sleek prototypes, and smiling engineers who made it seem like every idea turned into a breakthrough. What they did not show was the other side, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the way people disappeared quietly when they could not keep pace. Helion celebrated results, not survival. Those who thrived did so by pushing themselves to the edge. Those who burned out simply slipped away, replaced before anyone could ask questions. It was a world built on speed and silence. And at the center of it all was Adrian Vale. He had grown up in a worn-down neighborhood in Chicago, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs. Every interview he gave, every Stanford lecture he guest taught, painted him as the kind of man who clawed his way upward through sheer will and relentless focus. He coded his first algorithm at 15, won a national robotics competition at 17, and dropped out of college after 1 year to build Helion from his apartment. By 30, he was one of the youngest tech billionaires in the country. The press called him a visionary, a prodigy, a rarity. People inside Helion used other words: disciplined, distant, uncompromising. He carried an aura of impossible standards, as if being near him required you to perform better, breathe quieter, move faster. He rarely raised his voice because he never needed to. His quiet carried weight. His silence pressured entire rooms. In the beginning, I respected him from a distance, grateful he probably did not even know my name. But I was wrong. I started noticing it gradually, the way his attention flicked toward our team whenever we presented. He always stood in the back of the room, arms crossed, listening intently whenever I spoke about user behavior, emotional mapping, or interface flows. His gaze was steady, precise, so focused it sometimes made me lose my place in my own presentations. And then there were moments when something softened in his expression when I said something he found insightful, moments so quick I wondered if I imagined them. My coworkers definitely noticed. "Why does the CEO watch you like that?" Jenna whispered once after a meeting, half teasing, half suspicious. I laughed it off, but the truth was I did not know. Maybe he valued research more than he let on, or maybe he was simply evaluating everything that passed through the company. But sometimes it felt like something else, something unspoken that neither of us acknowledged. Still, there were lines. Adrian kept his distance. He did not hover. He did not interfere. And in a company where senior leaders frequently walked into rooms demanding answers or pushing deadlines, he never once used his presence to intimidate me. If anything, he stepped back, giving space in a way I never understood. Outside our department, the atmosphere was different. Helion ran on velocity. Deadlines were not guidelines. They were vows. Failure was not tolerated. Teams competed for visibility. Engineers bragged about pulling all-nighters like badges of honor. Every week, someone burned out and quietly updated their LinkedIn before slipping out the side entrance. I used to think I was immune to that cycle. I loved research. I loved understanding what people needed and why they felt overwhelmed, confused, or connected when interacting with a product. But the more Helion pushed forward, the more the people behind the screens became treated like abstractions, numbers in a dashboard. The tension only worsened as the IPO approached. Investors visited almost weekly, walking through labs in tailored suits, their polished shoes squeaking against the pristine floors. Leadership repeated the same mantra again and again. Deliver faster, optimize the workflow, reduce inefficiencies. Sometimes when executives walked past my desk, I felt like an object being evaluated, a resource to extract value from, not a person. And yet, through all of that, something strange began happening between me and Adrian. I would catch him watching our team from across the atrium, his gaze flicking to me before shifting away. Once during an elevator ride, he stepped in just as the doors were closing, and for 30 floors we stood inches apart in silence. My heart hammered the entire way. When the doors opened, he turned slightly, his voice low, almost gentle. "Good work on the flow model," he said before walking off, leaving me staring after him, confused by the warmth in his tone. It made no sense. He was the CEO. I was one researcher in a sea of talent, and yet every time his eyes met mine, it felt like he saw something others overlooked. I tried not to read into it. I tried to stay focused on my work. But attention is a powerful thing, respect even more so. And kindness from someone who rarely offered it felt like sunlight in a windowless room. Of course, not everyone appreciated it. Rumors surfaced quietly. People whispered that I was receiving special treatment, though I never did. Some insisted I must have connections, though I did not. A few suggested I had caught the CEO's interest, though I denied it every time. It did not matter. In places driven by competition envy, often found fertile ground. Still, I kept my head down and tried to pretend none of it bothered me. But the truth was, I felt the shift too. A subtle gravity between us, something neither of us acted on, something we avoided with deliberate discipline. There were boundaries. There were ethics. There were consequences. And so we remained in our separate orbits, circling each other without acknowledging the magnetic pull growing stronger each month. Helion was a world built on brilliance and breaking points. What I did not know then was that I was walking toward mine, and Adrian Vale was walking toward his. The first real connection between us did not happen in a meeting or during some high-stakes presentation. It happened on a quiet Thursday night when most of Helion had already cleared out and the building felt like a sleeping giant made of steel and humming circuits. I was hunched over my desk in the UX research corner, surrounded by sticky note sketches and 3 half-finished prototypes that were all demanding answers I no longer had the energy to find. My eyes burned from staring at a screen for too many hours straight. The office lights above flickered faintly as if exhausted too. I told myself I would leave after finishing one more task, just one more refinement to the user flow for the robotics dashboard, but that was a lie I had told myself too many times to count. The rest of the floor was empty, except for the quiet clicking of the HVAC system. Even the cleaning crew would not arrive for another hour. I rubbed my temples, wishing for sleep or clarity, or maybe both, when the faint rustle of movement down the hall caught my attention. I assumed it was security doing their rounds or another engineer stuck in their obsession with perfection. But when I stood to stretch and glanced toward the glass-walled conference room at the end of the hallway, I froze. Adrian Vale was inside. Alone. He was sitting at the long table wearing a dark sweater instead of his usual dress shirt sleeves pushed to his elbows, one hand holding a takeout fork, the other scrolling through a document on his tablet. It was such an unguarded image I almost doubted what I was seeing. CEOs were not supposed to look tired. They were not supposed to sit in empty conference rooms eating microwaved pasta at 9:30 at night. They were not supposed to look human, but he did. And for a moment I simply watched, trying to understand him the way I might try to understand a complex user pattern repeating in unexpected ways. I thought about walking past quietly, but my tired brain betrayed me. As I stepped forward, my foot clipped the metal leg of a rolling chair, sending an embarrassingly loud clang echoing down the hallway. I froze, grimaced, and hoped desperately he had not heard. He had. His head lifted immediately, eyes sharpening as they landed on me. For a second he looked surprised. Then something softer flickered across his expression. Recognition, maybe curiosity, maybe something else entirely. Maeve, he said, his voice carrying just enough to reach me. Still here? I felt heat rush to my cheeks. Yes. Just finishing up. He set his fork down, stood and walked toward me, the overhead lights reflecting off the rain-streaked windows behind him. When he stopped a few feet away, I realized this was the closest I had ever seen him outside of a meeting room. Without the barrier of a table or the buffer of an entire team between us, he felt larger somehow, more tangible and far more intimidating. Or maybe that was just the exhaustion amplifying everything around me. "You have been working late all week," he said. Not accusing, just observing. I swallowed. Deadlines. He nodded slowly, as if weighing the truth I had not spoken out loud. Deadlines were only half the story, and we both knew it. He gestured toward the conference room. I was about to heat up another cup of coffee. "If you need a break, there is plenty of food left." The offer caught me off guard. I hesitated, unsure if stepping into that room would blur a line I did not fully understand. He must have sensed my reluctance because he added quietly, "You look like you could use a pause." He was right. My head throbbed. My thoughts were sluggish and my hands were trembling just slightly. Against my better judgment, I nodded. When I entered the room, the smell of warm pasta tomato sauce and garlic filled the air, a small, comforting contrast to the cold, blue light of the office. He pushed a fresh set of takeout containers toward me. I sat across from him, the distance between us measured but gentle. "You always work this late?" I asked, trying to make the moment feel less strange. "Often," he replied, taking a sip of coffee. "Helion does not run itself." I glanced at the scattered documents around him. Graphs, projections, investor notes. He was carrying the weight of an empire, and yet he looked like a man running on fumes. "Do you ever rest?" I asked before I could stop myself. A faint hint of amusement touched his eyes. "Sometimes, when the world allows for it." There was something honest in the way he said it, something vulnerable that made him feel less like a figurehead and more like a man caught in the same currents that pulled the rest of us. We talked about the dashboard he was reviewing, about a design flaw I had noticed earlier that week. I expected him to dismiss my thoughts, but instead he leaned forward, listening intently as if my insight mattered. As if I mattered. That small shift in his focus, the undivided attention of someone who rarely granted it, caused a warmth to spread in my chest. Then the conversation drifted in a direction I had not anticipated. He asked, "How do you handle days when the pressure feels heavier than usual?" The question hung in the space between us, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with romance, yet everything to do with connection. I hesitated, unsure whether he wanted a polished answer or the truth, and eventually I whispered, "I do not know if I handle them. I think I just survive them." His expression changed subtly, something tightening behind his eyes. "That is not how it should be, Maeve." I let out a humorless breath, but it is how it is for a lot of us. Silence settled for a few seconds, not uncomfortable, just waited. Then he reached to the side, grabbed something, and held it out to me. "My umbrella." I stared at it, surprised. "You left it in the lobby this morning," he said. I meant to return it earlier. Outside rain tapped against the glass in steady, rhythmic pulses. When I finally stood to leave for the night, he walked with me to the elevator, a quiet, unspoken companionship forming in the space between our steps. We rode down in silence, the soft whir of the elevator filling the air. When the doors opened onto the empty parking level, he paused, then gently placed the umbrella into my hands. "It is supposed to pour again," he murmured. "I want you to get home safely." I looked up into his eyes, and something in them, something warm and unguarded, made my breath catch. "Thank you," I whispered, unable to say more. I did not know then that this moment, this quiet exchange under the dim elevator lights, would plant the first seed of something that would grow far beyond either of our expectations. But, standing there with the storm waiting outside and his unexpected kindness lingering in the air, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Seen. After that quiet Thursday night, something subtle shifted between us, though neither of us acknowledged it directly. It was not dramatic or obvious, not something that would make coworkers whisper in hallways or raise eyebrows in meetings. It was smaller, softer, the kind of shift you only notice when you look back and realize the ground beneath your feet had been slowly moving long before you felt it. It started with an email, a simple one, sent at 10:47 the next evening when I was curled up on my couch surrounded by open notebooks and half-eaten leftovers. The subject line read, "UX Flow Question." The message was short. I keep coming back to the conversation we had about the dashboard. Could you clarify what you meant about the emotional load distribution? AV. I stared at the screen, blinking. Adrian Vale, the man who had entire departments at his disposal and a fleet of senior leaders who would answer him at any hour of the day, had emailed me directly. Me. And not just with a command or directive, but with a question, a thoughtful one. I typed out a careful reply, adding visuals and a brief explanation, then hovered over the send button for a full minute before finally pressing it. I expected that to be the end of it, but 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. His response was longer this time. He asked a follow-up question, then another, and by the time the clock hit midnight, we had exchanged 12 emails. "I should sleep now," he wrote. "Meetings start early, but thank you, Maeve. Your perspective helps more than you realize." And that was the moment the late-night pattern began. Over the next few weeks, the emails continued. Some were short, some detailed, some purely about work, and some drifting into thoughts on design, philosophy, user behavior, or human emotion. I found myself looking forward to them the way someone looks forward to a warm drink on a cold night, not because they need it, but because it comforts them. Then, one night the email stopped and a message appeared instead. A text message. From an unknown number, but I knew immediately it was him. "I hope it is all right that I reached out this way," the message said. "The email server is down and I did not want to lose the thread of our conversation. If you prefer, I will wait until morning. A.V." My heart thudded hard. I told myself it was because the message was unexpected, because a CEO should not be texting an employee after hours because boundaries were important. But that was only half true. The other truth was simpler. I wanted to reply, and so I did. We shifted from emails to texts within a week. Not intentionally, not because either of us suggested it, but because it felt natural, organic. Our messages grew longer, drifting into late hours. Sometimes we talked about work, sometimes about random thoughts, sometimes about the strange loneliness of a life spent solving problems faster than you can process them. One night he sent a message at 1:23 in the morning. "Do you ever feel like you are carrying more than people notice?" His words cut through the dark like a whisper into a quiet room. I hesitated, then typed a reply without overthinking. "Every day." He did not respond right away. I figured he had fallen asleep or gotten pulled into something urgent. But 10 minutes later, another message arrived. I thought I was the only one. The admission stunned me. Adrian never admitted weakness. Not in meetings, not in interviews, not in the rare internal updates he recorded for the company. But he admitted something to me. That night, our messages went on for more than an hour. We talked about the exhaustion that seeped between deadlines and the weight of always being the one people depended on, and the ache of pretending we were fine, even when we felt like we were unraveling too quickly to catch the loose threads. At some point during that conversation, I realized this was no longer about work. This was something else, something quiet and delicate and frighteningly honest. And yet nothing crossed a line. We did not flirt. We did not say anything suggestive. We did not even acknowledge the strange warmth forming between our words. But I felt it, and I suspected he did too. The next few weeks followed a rhythm. Days were brutal. Nights were soft. He would text at odd hours, asking about a design concept or sharing a thought on user psychology or admitting he had not eaten dinner yet. I would tease him, gently telling him to take better care of himself. He would reply with a small piece of sarcasm or thanks or something that read almost like a smile. Work remained professional, but different. Whenever our paths crossed during the day, there was a shift in the air, a brief flicker of recognition, a subtle drop in his voice when he said my name. Once in a crowded meeting, his gaze drifted toward me during a heated exchange between departments, and the moment his eyes landed on mine, the tension in my chest eased. It was small. It was barely noticeable. But I felt it anyway. One night, near the end of a particularly chaotic week, he sent a message while I was walking home in the cold drizzle. "Are you safe getting home at this hour?" I exhaled a small laugh, my breath fogging in the chilly air. "Yes. Just tired. Long day." His reply came quickly. "You should not have to carry this alone, Maeve." My steps slowed as I read it again and again. No one had said something like that to me in a long time, maybe ever. I typed a simple thanks, but inside a quiet truth cracked open. I was beginning to depend on these messages, on him, on the strange, fragile connection weaving itself between the pixels on my screen. But there was another truth running parallel. The deeper our conversations grew, the more the pressure at Helion built. Deadlines were tightening, investor demands increasing, internal tensions rising. And somewhere beneath the surface of those late-night conversations, I sensed something else forming, a question neither of us asked but both of us felt. What happens when connection collides with responsibility? When warmth collides with fear? When two people separated by distance and hierarchy and unspoken rules begin drifting closer without meaning to? The answer would come soon, far sooner than either of us was ready for. But the night the texts began was the night everything changed for us. I did not know then how much those messages would alter the course of my life. I only knew that when my phone buzzed, I felt less alone. And so did he. The pressure did not arrive all at once. It built the way. Winter creeps into Portland slowly at first, then all at once until you wake one morning and realize the cold has settled into your bones. At Helion Systems, the shift from demanding to unbearable happened quietly. The company had been preparing for its IPO for more than a year, but in the months leading up to it, the tension thickened until every hallway conversation felt sharper, every meeting more brittle, every deadline more suffocating. The unspoken message was everywhere: deliver perfection or risk becoming collateral damage. I had always prided myself on being able to handle intensity. I thrived under creative pressure. But this was different. This was survival pressure, and it wrapped around all of us like a tightening rope. My closest coworker Jenna joked that we should have been issued helmets and oxygen tanks, but even her laugh was thin-stretched. By early spring, the weight of the upcoming public offering had created a collective desperation across teams. Engineers were pulling 70-hour weeks, analysts slept in nap pods. Research members ate meals over keyboards. My own projects tripled in complexity. The UX research roadmap had ballooned far beyond what a reduced team could reasonably accomplish. Every day brought new expectations, new revisions, new features that someone insisted were essential even if we barely had time to evaluate them. Investors were demanding faster results. Product managers were demanding perfect clarity. And above all, leadership wanted the appearance of flawless execution. On paper, Helion was a machine. Inside it was fraying. I found myself arriving earlier and leaving later than ever before. Some nights I did not leave at all, choosing instead to collapse on the couch in our small quiet room near the back of the research floor, using my backpack as a pillow and my coat as a blanket. I told myself it was temporary, that I just had to survive this phase until the IPO settled and everything shifted into something calmer. But I knew that was a lie. The panic attack in the hallway had been the first warning. The second warning hit 2 weeks later. I was sitting in a restroom stall trying to escape a migraine that pulsed behind my eyes like a warning siren. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright, too loud. My phone buzzed once, then twice. I ignored it. I pressed my palms to my temples, breathing through the wave of dizziness. For a moment, the room tilted and I grabbed the wall to steady myself. I had been pushing too hard, too long. When I finally managed to stand, my legs trembled under the weight of exhaustion. I walked out, splashed cold water on my face, and kept moving because that was what Helion demanded from all of us: relentless forward motion. I tried not to think about the messages until I returned to my desk. 2 unread notifications waited on my screen. The first was from Marcus, the CTO, summoning me to review data his team still had not provided. The second was from Adrian, leaving the building so late again. "Are you all right?" I stared at his message, swallowing a knot of emotion. He had been paying attention again. He always paid attention, more than he should have. I typed back, "I am fine, just tired." His reply came almost instantly. "You do not look fine. I saw you in the elevator earlier. You seemed pale." I froze. I had not noticed him. I had been too focused on keeping my breathing steady. I forced myself to respond, "I am managing." That was the truth. Barely. But it was easier than admitting I was unraveling. He did not press, but a heaviness settled inside me, knowing he could see through me more easily than anyone else. The days grew heavier. With every passing hour, demands multiplied. One afternoon, as I was reviewing a batch of prototype videos, the room blurred, and a hot flash of pain seared the left side of my skull. I clutched the desk, steadying myself. The next thing I knew, I was on the cold tile of the bathroom floor again, except this time consciousness slipped in and out like waves. Someone called my name, but it sounded miles away. When I opened my eyes, I saw him. Adrian knelt beside me again, his expression taut with a mixture of worry and restraint. He lifted a hand as if to touch my shoulder but stopped inches away. "Maeve, can you hear me?" His voice was steady in a way that steadied me. I nodded weakly, tears pricking my eyes from the intensity of the migraine. He reached out slowly this time, helping me sit up with a touch so gentle it startled me. He guided me carefully through the empty hallway toward the wellness room, turning off harsh lights and lowering the blinds as he helped me lie down on the cot. I wanted to tell him he did not have to stay. I wanted to tell him I was fine, but the truth was that I was not fine, and somehow he knew it. He pulled a blanket over me, his movements careful, deliberate, as though afraid I might break. When my breathing steadied, he finally sat in the chair beside the cot, his elbows resting on his knees, head lowered. His voice was quiet when he finally spoke. "You cannot keep doing this to yourself. This place is asking too much from you." I blinked slowly, my head still throbbing. "It is asking too much from everyone." "Yes, but not everyone is collapsing in bathrooms." His voice cracked on the last word so lightly I almost missed it. I closed my eyes, partly because I could not look at him, partly because the room was too bright, partly because his concern pierced through something I had tried to keep locked away. After a few minutes, or maybe longer, he said softly, "If something happens to you—" I paused, breath catching, waiting for him to finish, but he did not. He simply sat there, keeping watch. When I finally woke an hour later, he was still in the chair, still waiting, still quiet. For one suspended moment our eyes met and something passed between us, something both grounding and frightening. I pulled my hand away from where it had been resting near his. He noticed, and his expression flickered with something almost like hurt. But he rose, silently gave me space, and left the room with the softest click of the door. That night, I lay awake in my apartment long after the city had gone quiet. I replayed the way he had watched over me, the way his voice had softened, the way he had stopped himself from crossing lines even in moments of panic. And beneath all of it, one truth pulsed steady and undeniable. Something was building between us. Something I was afraid to name. Something we both were. But the pressure at Helion was building faster, and soon it would break us both. The day everything finally snapped did not arrive with warning. It came disguised as another ordinary morning in a long line of brutal ones. I woke before sunrise to the buzzing of my phone vibrating against the nightstand with 3 new deadlines, 2 meeting reschedules, and one curt reminder from Marcus that the updated UX report needed to be ready before lunch. My head already throbbed before I sat up. Portland's sky was pale and washed out, the kind of muted gray that felt eerily similar to the numbness sliding beneath my ribs. I dressed mechanically, grabbed a protein bar I would forget to eat, and took the Max train downtown with the rest of the exhausted early commuters. When I entered Helion's towering lobby, the security guard nodded without recognition. I realized then he had seen me walk in every morning at the same tired hour for months. I made my way to the 23rd floor, breathing in the familiar sterile scent of recycled air and overheated servers. The hum of machinery and clipped conversations blended into the background noise of my own racing thoughts. I sat down at my desk, turned on my monitor, and began typing as if motion alone could stop the panic crawling up my spine. At 9:20 sharp, an alert pinged across my screen. All department leads report to Conference 4A. Mandatory. My stomach dipped. Mandatory meant blame. Mandatory meant politics. Mandatory meant someone was about to get thrown under the bus. I took a breath, grabbed my laptop, and made the long walk to the glass-walled room that had seen too many battles and too few victories. I entered to find Marcus already at the head of the table, pacing with agitated energy, flipping through a printed stack of charts and metrics as if preparing ammunition. The product managers were tense eyes darting, whispering amongst themselves. Engineers sat rigidly, hands folded. A heavy air filled the room thick with anticipation. Adrian was not there. For a moment I felt relief, then fear. If he was not here, he could not protect anyone, and certainly not me. Marcus cleared his throat loudly, and the room fell silent. "We have a problem," he announced. "A serious one." Investor review flagged major inconsistencies in the predictive model embedded in the robotics interface. He slapped a chart onto the table. These numbers are unacceptable. My pulse quickened. I recognized the interface layout instantly. It was tied to the UX research project I had been leading for weeks. But the inconsistencies he pointed to had nothing to do with user flow. They were raw data errors. Data that did not originate from my team. Marcus continued pacing, voice rising. We promised clean, reliable user behavior mapping. What we delivered is a disaster. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on me like a spotlight. Maeve, as lead researcher, you will need to explain why this happened. The room turned. Dozens of eyes watched me. Some curious, some sympathetic, some satisfied a scapegoat had been found. My throat tightened. I swallowed and forced out a steady voice. We based our flow models on your department's logs. The raw data came from your engineers, not mine. The words were polite, controlled, factually accurate. Marcus's expression darkened. My department delivered exactly what was requested. If your team misinterpreted the data, that is on you. A spark of anger flared in my chest. That is not what happened. The logs were incomplete. They were missing cross-segment timing indicators. Your analysts sent them at midnight with no verification. Engineers shifted in their seats. A few looked down. They knew I was right. Marcus's jaw tightened. Are you suggesting my team is incompetent? His voice carried a warning. I tried to remain calm. I am saying the data was flawed before it reached us, and you can check the timestamp history to confirm it. Murmurs rippled across the table. He hated being challenged. And he hated being wrong even more. Marcus stepped closer, looming over me. Perhaps the issue is not the data. Perhaps the issue is that you are overwhelmed and no longer capable of leading this research. The words punched the air from my lungs. He did not stop. You have been distracted, unreliable. You have missed 2 minor deadlines this month. You were late to last week's sync. And frankly, your attitude recently has been concerning. Heat flushed my face. I felt the eyes again all around me, pressing in like a tightening vice. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but he cut me off. And now this, he said, waving the report dramatically. A failed project weeks before IPO. My pulse hammered. Marcus, you know this was not my fault. He smiled. Cold. Calculated. CEOs and investors do not care about blame, Maeve. They care about results. And right now you are a liability. I froze. The word hit harder than I expected. Liability. A word that reduced my years of work to a risk factor. A disposable element. I felt something tearing inside me, a slow, quiet rip the way fabric gives way after being stretched too far. My breath grew shallow. The walls seemed to pulse. Someone at the far end of the table whispered, "Is she okay?" I tried to inhale. The air refused to come. I gripped the edge of the table as the room tilted. Light fractured into sharp flickers. Not again. Not here. Not in front of all these people. I forced myself to stand. My chair scraped loudly against the floor as I stumbled back. Maeve. Sit down, Marcus snapped, sounding annoyed. But I could not. My heart crashed violently against my ribs. My hands trembled uncontrollably. The glass walls blurred. I tried to say, I need air. I pushed out of the conference room, barely seeing the hallway through the haze. The world was sound and light and panic. My chest tightened until every breath burned. Someone called my name, but it sounded distant, distorted. I leaned against the wall, sliding down until my knees hit the carpet. Tears streamed without my permission. My fingers curled helplessly against the floor. A pair of footsteps approached sharply. Someone knelt. I knew who it was before I saw him. Maeve Adrian's voice cut through the noise like a lifeline, steady, deep, familiar. He touched my shoulder gently, guiding me to breathe slowly, matching his rhythm. I followed it like it was the only solid thing left. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. The panic loosened just enough to let air back in. When I lifted my head and met his eyes, I saw something in them I had never seen before. Fury. Not at me. For me. He whispered quietly so only I could hear, "I am sorry. I should not have let him do that to you." Something inside me cracked wide open then. Not because of Marcus, but because of Adrian, and the way he looked at me like losing me would break something in him too. That was the moment everything ended, and everything began. I did not remember standing up. I did not remember walking away from Adrian or the conference room or the hallway floor where my panic had swallowed the last of my strength. All I remembered was the cold numbness spreading through me as I moved on autopilot past rows of desks, past coworkers pretending not to watch me pass the glass elevator that reflected a pale, empty version of myself. I felt hollow, made of paper and ache. By the time I reached the lobby, my legs were shaking. Outside, Portland rain clung to the windows in streaks that blurred the world beyond. The city moved with its usual Friday rhythm. Buses hissing at curbs, cyclists dodging puddles, office workers rushing by with umbrellas, but everything felt muted, distant. Like I stood behind thick glass watching a life that no longer belonged to me. I walked into the small coffee shop across the street, ordered nothing, sat in a corner booth, and stared at the untouched napkin dispenser. My hands trembled when I finally pulled out my phone. I opened a blank email. To HR. My heart hammered as I began typing. Dear Helion Systems, please accept this as my formal resignation, effective immediately. The cursor blinked at me. Too cold. Too abrupt. But what else was I supposed to say? That I had reached my limit, that the company I once believed in had crushed me piece by piece, that I no longer recognized myself in the mirror each morning. I steadied my breath and continued. I appreciate the opportunities I've been given, but I can no longer remain in a position where I feel unsafe, unsupported, and unable to contribute meaningfully. I wish the team success moving forward. Maeve Carter. I stared at my name for a long time. 4 years condensed into 2 lines. I hovered over send. My hand shook, not from fear, from release, and then I pressed the button. Sent. My chest caved inward. A small, involuntary sob escaped before I could stop it. It was done. I was free. Free in the way a tree is free after being uprooted, no longer bound but barely standing. My phone buzzed immediately. HR confirmation. Then another buzz. A message from Adrian. Where are you? His timing was impossibly cruel and impossibly perfect. I typed slowly in the booth, fingers trembling. I resigned. Silence. 10 seconds, 20. Then my phone lit up again. Maeve? Wait. His typing bubble appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then finally, can I talk to you? Please. I closed my eyes tightly, fighting off the tidal pull of emotion behind my ribs. I could still feel his hands guiding my breathing in the hallway. The fury in his eyes when Marcus humiliated me. The tremor in his voice when he whispered I should not have let him do that to you. But none of that mattered now. Nothing could fix what had broken. I typed back, "There's nothing to talk about." More silence. Then a single message, "Do not leave the building. I am coming." My stomach twisted. No. I could not face him, not like this, not so raw, not when one look from him might crack open the last, fragile part of me trying to hold itself together. I rose from the booth and walked out through the rain without looking back. I ignored the buzz of my phone. I ignored the way my pulse pounded like I was running from something and toward something at the same time. I went home. My apartment felt foreign as I stepped inside. As if I had returned from a war I never meant to fight. The boxes I had been meaning to pack for weeks sat half-filled in the corner. I told myself I would get through the afternoon quietly, make tea, sit on the couch, breathe. But the moment I closed the door behind me, everything inside me cracked. I slid down the wall onto the wooden floor, hugging my knees. Tears falling soundlessly at first, then in waves. Hours blurred. I lost track of time. Sometimes I lay still, staring at the ceiling. Sometimes I wandered into the kitchen only to forget why I was there. Sometimes I replayed the conference room moment until my chest burned. The word liability echoed like a bruise I could not touch without wincing. Late afternoon faded into evening. The rain eased, then returned heavier than before, tapping against my windows in a relentless rhythm. I forced myself to stand, wiped my face, and began packing. It felt like something to do, something I could control. I folded shirts, stacked books, sorted cables. The repetition numbed me. When I opened the drawer of my nightstand, my breath caught. My old sketchbook. I had not touched it in months. I sat on the edge of the bed and flipped through it. Designs, concepts, people I used to interview for research, notes about empathy mapping and emotional load reduction, ideas I had loved, ideas that had once felt important. Now they felt like memories from another life. Sometime after 8, my phone vibrated again. Adrian. For a long moment I stared at his name glowing on the screen. Then I placed the phone face down on the bed. I could not talk to him. Not tonight. Not when my heart was oscillating between relief and devastation. Not when I felt so fragile a single kind word from him might undo me completely. A notification badge appeared. 12 unread messages. I muted the phone. I tucked it under a pillow like hiding it could hide the ache. I resumed packing, letting muscle memory take over. Fold, tape, stack, move. Rain hammered the roof louder now. A gust rattled the window. Outside, the street lamps flickered in the downpour. I went to the kitchen, filled the kettle, turned it on, and leaned forward on the counter, palms pressed against cool marble breath. Shaky. And then a sound. A soft, hesitant knock. My heart froze. Once. Twice. Not forceful, not angry, not confused. Just there. My hands tightened on the counter. No, it could not be. Another knock, louder this time. My breath hitched. I walked to the door, each step unsteady. When I reached it, I hesitated, hand hovering over the knob. For one impossible moment, I considered pretending I was not home. But something deeper, painful, magnetic, undeniable, pulled my fingers forward. I opened the door, and there he was, drenched from the rain. Chest rising and falling, eyes holding a fear I had never seen in him. Adrian swallowed, voice raw. Maeve, you cannot just disappear, but I already had, and nothing would ever be the same. Adrian Vale was not a man easily shaken. Helion's board used to say he had a spine made of steel, a mind wired for pressure, and a heart wrapped so tightly no crisis could reach it. But the 3 days after I resigned shattered all of that. And he knew it, and everyone around him knew it. On the morning of my resignation, Adrian walked into the executive wing at Helion with the same measured steps he always took, controlled, focused, unreadable. But beneath the surface, something volatile churned. Something he had no training for, something no business school or startup war story had prepared him to handle. Losing me. He replayed the HR notification again and again on his phone. Employee resignation, Maeve Carter. Effective immediately. No warning, no meeting, no explanation beyond a polite message that felt like a wall slammed down between us. He sat alone in his office reading the words until they blurred. The skyline stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but he saw none of it. His mind scripted the same question on a loop. Why didn't she come to me? But even that hurt. Because he knew the answer. He had let me walk into a battlefield alone. He had watched Marcus tear me apart in a room full of people. He had seen the panic take me, seen me collapse, and still, he had done nothing soon enough, loud enough, strong enough to stop it. He had protected the company. The IPO, the image, but not me. And the realization gutted him. The board expected an update that morning on investor confidence. Instead, Adrian walked into the conference room late, hair slightly disheveled, shirt untucked at the back, a detail so unusual that the CFO stared at him like he'd walked in with blood on his collar. Adrian sat wordlessly flipping through presentation slides with trembling fingers. Investors want clarity on the prototype timeline the CFO began. if the UX research team. The words ignited something. Adrian slammed the folder shut with a force that startled the room. We're not discussing timelines today. We are discussing leadership failures. Every executive froze, because Adrian never raised his voice. Ever. What failure exactly? The CTO asked, eyes narrowing. Yours. Adrian's reply was cold enough to frost glass. People shifted nervously. The CFO swallowed. Adrian. Maybe we should talk privately, no? His gaze cut across the table like a blade. Not this time. A lead researcher just resigned because she was hung out to dry under your department's incompetence. The CTO flushed. Are you suggesting I am stating facts? Adrian snapped. Your team delivered corrupted logs. You blamed her to cover your mistakes. The CTO sputtered, looking around for backup, but none came. Adrian's voice dropped to a deadly quiet. If she walks, it's on your conscience. That is what failure looks like. The room fell silent. The CFO cleared his throat carefully. Adrian, we have an IPO and I know exactly what we have. And we will not reach it if the company loses its soul along the way. Executives stared stunned. Adrian never talked about souls. He talked about numbers, models, outcomes. But today, he was not the CEO they knew. Today, he was something raw stripped of armor, running awake through a nightmare he could not shake off. After the meeting, his assistant approached him gingerly. Sir, are you all right? He didn't answer. He walked past her straight into his office, locked the door, and replayed the last moment he saw me, kneeling on the hallway floor gasping for air, eyes brimming with fear and humiliation, and his own voice whispering, I am sorry. I should not have let him do that to you. He scrubbed a hand across his face. His regret tasted like iron. The first day ended with him staying in his office until midnight, ignoring calls, ignoring dinner, ignoring the growing stack of urgent matters sitting on his desk. His mind was a single, repeating loop. She's gone. And it's my fault. The second day was worse. He barely slept. He arrived at Helion before sunrise, pacing the atrium like a man calculating escape routes from a burning building. He texted me twice, then 10 times, then stopped himself when he realized he was doing the very thing he had sworn never to do, crossing boundaries I did not consent to. Still, the messages stayed unsent but typed in drafts. Maeve, please tell me you're all right. And another, I never meant for you to face that alone. And another, I should have protected you. By noon, he called HR demanding information. They refused per policy. He called IT. They refused. He texted Jenna, who had no idea what happened. Maeve just disappeared, she said. The words stabbed him. He canceled 2 investor calls. He excused himself from a board review. He snapped at Marcus in front of 3 directors, then walked out before anyone could comment. He spent the rest of the day in his office replaying every conversation we'd ever had, the elevator rides, the quiet meetings, the late-night text threads. He remembered how my voice softened when I talked about user empathy. He remembered how my hands shook when I handed him a prototype after too little sleep. He remembered the way my eyes dimmed a little each week as the pressure built, and he remembered doing nothing. The third day broke him. He showed up late, hair mussed tie, gone shirt sleeves pushed to his elbows. The entire executive wing pretended not to stare. He tried working but kept rereading my resignation email. I wished the team success moving forward. The neutrality of it gutted him. It felt like watching someone erase themselves cleanly from his world. At lunch, he walked the hallways passing desks where I used to sit, seeing sticky notes I wrote, still stuck to walls, seeing a mug I left behind on a windowsill. He found himself in the research lab staring at a scribble of my handwriting on a whiteboard. Emotional load reduction. His throat tightened. The afternoon dragged like wet cement. By 3 o'clock, he hadn't eaten, hadn't spoken to anyone, hadn't done anything except try to breathe around the ache in his chest. Then he stood abruptly, grabbed his coat, ignored his assistant calling after him, ignored the CFO shouting Adrian. Where are you going? He paused only long enough to turn back and say the words that sent ripples of shock across the entire floor. to fix the one thing that actually matters. And then he walked out of Helion's doors, got into his car, and began searching for me. He had no plan, no speech, no idea what he would say when he found me. He only knew one thing. He could not lose me. Not like this, not without trying, not without telling me everything he had buried for months. He checked 3 different addresses, old data, dead ends, until finally he found the right building, my building. Rain pounded his windshield as he parked. He stepped out without an umbrella, letting the storm drench him. He walked to my door, lifted his hand, knocked, and, with every heartbeat between those knocks, he whispered the truth he had never said aloud. "Please open. Please let me fix this. Please do not let this be the end." The rain was heavy enough to blur every edge of the street into a watercolor smear when I opened the door. The wind pushed droplets inside cold against my bare feet, but I barely noticed. All I could see was him. Adrian stood under the dim hallway light, soaked from head to toe, breathing hard like he had sprinted the last block. His hair clung to his forehead, his shirt plastered to his skin, and his usually composed posture looked fractured by something raw and desperate. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The world narrowed into the small distance between us, into the faint sound of rain, into the unsteady rhythm of our breathing. Finally, he swallowed and said my name. Maeve. Just that. Soft. Breaking. The way a person speaks a word they have carried for too long without letting it fall. My fingers tightened around the edge of the door. Adrian, you should not be here. He stepped forward instinctively, then stopped himself as if remembering the invisible line between us. I know I should not, but I came anyway, because you left, and because I cannot let this be the way we end. A hollow ache echoed in my chest. There is no we, I whispered. His breath hitched almost imperceptibly. Then he looked at me with a kind of ache that made it impossible to hold his gaze without feeling something inside me tremble. He lifted a hand, not touching me, just letting it hover near the frame of the door. You quit your job, he said quietly, voice shaking. But I am not losing you. The words landed like a collision of everything I'd been trying not to feel. Everything I had buried under exhaustion and fear. I stepped back instinctively, the weight of his confession pressing too close. Adrian, you do not get to come here and say things like that. You are my former boss. You are the CEO. You make decisions that ruin people. His face twisted, a mix of pain and guilt. I know what I am, but I am also standing here as a man who failed someone he cared about deeply. I needed the door for support. Cared about. His jaw tensed. You know I do. The admission made the air between us go still. Not romantic, not dramatic, just honest, unprotected. He took a slow breath, rainwater dripping from his eyelashes. May I come in? He asked. Please. Just for a moment. My body screamed no. My heart whispered something else entirely. I hesitated long enough for him to lower his eyes, like he was preparing himself for me to shut the door in his face. And maybe I should have. Maybe it would have been easier for both of us. But I stepped aside. He exhaled shakily and walked in, careful not to drip too much onto the floor. I closed the door behind him, though it felt like closing myself inside the very storm I had been trying to escape. He stood in the middle of my small living space, dripping onto the hardwood floor, taking in the half-packed boxes, the scattered clothes, the muted lamp, the quiet evidence of someone trying to rebuild themselves from the wreckage. You are leaving Portland, he asked softly. I did not answer. His shoulders sank as if the idea of losing not just me, but the possibility of me physically leaving the city ripped something out of him. He turned toward me, his voice rough. Why did you not tell me you were quitting? Why did you not give me a chance? A sharp laugh, humorless, escaped me. A chance? To do what? Protect me from a system you built, a system you benefit from every time someone collapses under the pressure. Adrian flinched like I had struck him. I deserve that, he whispered, but you do not. Anger and exhaustion surged up my throat. You watched Marcus tear me apart. You saw what that room did to me. I needed someone to say something. but you did nothing." His eyes shut briefly, as if the memory burned. "I should have stopped him. I should have defended you. I know that, and it is the worst mistake I've made in years." I wanted to argue. I wanted to stay angry, but the regret in his voice was real, heavy, devastating. Took a step closer, not enough to touch, enough for his voice to lower. "Maeve, I did not protect you because I was afraid." I frowned. "Afraid of what?" "The truth," he said quietly. "And myself." I stared at him, confusion swirling with something else, something dangerous. He breathed in slowly, then said what I had never expected to hear. "I have cared about you for months, more than I should, more than I tried to admit, and when that room turned on you I froze because doing what was right meant revealing what I felt, and I was not ready for that." The room seemed to tilt. I gripped my arms, unsure if I was cold or simply shaking. Adrian continued, his voice cracking. "I did not stay silent because you were unworthy of defending. I stayed silent because I have feelings for you that cross every professional line I promised myself I would never break." My breath caught. I was not prepared. He stepped closer again carefully, as if approaching a frightened animal. I thought distance would protect both of us. I thought if I stayed behind that wall I could keep this contained. But then you collapsed, and the wall shattered. A tear slipped down his cheek, mixing with rainwater. "I could not lose you then. I cannot lose you now." I shook my head, overwhelmed. "Adrian, you cannot just come here, say these things, and expect me to forget everything that happened." He nodded gently. "I do not expect forgiveness, and I am not asking for anything. I am only telling you the truth, because I should have said it long before tonight." My throat tightened, my voice barely a whisper. "I do not know what to do with any of this." His eyes softened. "You do not have to do anything. I just need you to know." The room fell into a fragile silence, interrupted only by the rain tapping the windows. The storm outside raged. The storm inside me trembled. He took one final step, close enough that I could feel his warmth despite the damp cold clinging to him. "Maeve," he whispered, "if I could go back and redo the last week, the last month, the last year, I would. Every piece of it. I wanted to protect you more than I wanted to protect Helion. I just did not know how." I closed my eyes because looking at him hurt too much. Because a part of me still ached from what happened. Because another part of me, a part I did not want to acknowledge, still softened at the way he said my name. Then his next words broke whatever was left of my resolve. "I came here tonight because losing you is the one thing I cannot accept. Not as a CEO, not as a colleague, not as a man." I exhaled shakily. "Adrian, I cannot." He stepped back, giving me space without being asked. Voice quiet but steady. "You do not need to decide anything tonight, but please do not leave without knowing, without hearing it." He looked at me then, with an honesty that made my bones feel transparent. "I am not losing you, not without a fight." And for the first time since I left Helion, something inside me cracked open, not in pain this time, but in possibility. The rain softened outside, but inside my apartment the air felt heavier than ever as Adrian stood in front of me, no longer the untouchable CEO, no longer the figure everyone feared and admired, but a man stripped of every layer he had ever used to protect himself. For the first time since he arrived, he wiped the water from his face, his hands trembling slightly, and whispered, "Maeve, can we sit?" I hesitated, then nodded, and we moved to the small couch in my living room, leaving a careful space between us, though the space felt charged like a live wire stretched thin. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was the kind of silence that demanded something be broken, that some truth be pulled up from the deep where both of us had been burying it. He exhaled slowly, and the sound carried months of restraint. "I have held back so much," he said quietly. "Things I should have said long before this." I stared at the floor, afraid of meeting his eyes, afraid of what I might see, and afraid of what it might pull out of me. Adrian continued, voice low, almost reverent. "I have feelings for you, Maeve. Deep ones. Not sudden, not impulsive. They started months ago, the first time I heard you defend your work in that product meeting. You cared more about our users than anyone in the room. You spoke with clarity and fire. I remember thinking I had never seen anything like it. I swallowed hard, unsure how to hold the weight of his confession. And then the late nights he continued the emails and the texts. You challenged me in ways no one else did. You saw things I missed, and you cared not because it was your job, but because you believed in what we were building. His voice broke a little. I admired you, and then I cared about you, and then I realized I was falling for you. I clenched my hands together, heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear him. Adrian looked down, jaw tight. But I was terrified. Of what I asked, barely above a whisper. Of crossing a line, he replied. Of using my position to influence you, of making you uncomfortable, of people assuming you got things you earned because of me. I never wanted to trap you in something you did not choose. My eyes stung. The sincerity in his voice made my throat tighten. But I saw you hurting, he said softer. I saw the pressure building. I saw how the team relied on you too much, how the load was unfair, how the expectations were inhumane. And I did nothing. His voice cracked openly now. Not because I did not want to, but because I convinced myself that protecting you would expose something I was not supposed to feel. And that was cowardice. A tear slid down my cheek before I could stop it. I wiped it quickly, hoping he did not notice, but of course he did. Maeve, he whispered, voice shaking. Talk to me, please. My breath trembled. I was angry, Adrian. So angry. Not just at you, but at the entire machine. I felt invisible, replaceable, disposable. Like the moment something went wrong, I was the easiest person to blame. His face twisted in pain. You were never disposable. Never. But that room made me feel that way, I said, voice cracking. It felt like everything I had given meant nothing, and I looked at you and you did not say a word. He squeezed his eyes shut as if the memory hurt him physically. I failed you. I know I did. And I would give anything to take that moment back. But I cannot. All I can do is tell you everything now, even if it ruins whatever chance I have left. I stared at him, feeling something in my chest unraveling painfully. Adrian inhaled deeply, then spoke with a steadiness that felt like truth carved from marrow. I love the way you think. I love the way you fight for people who do not even know your name. I love how you see the world through empathy first and logic second, while I have spent years doing the opposite. His breath trembled. You make me want to be better. You make me human in ways I forgot how to be. My hands shook. Adrian lowered his voice almost a whisper. I tried to bury these feelings. I tried to keep distance. I tried to pretend you were just another employee, but every night, every conversation, every small moment chipped away at that lie. And when you collapsed in that hallway, I realized something terrifying. I realized losing you would break me in a way no business failure ever could. My heart clenched painfully at the raw truth in his voice. He turned to me then, fully eyes unshielded, vulnerable in a way I had never seen. Tell me what you feel, Maeve. I will accept anything. I looked at him and words finally rose from a place I had locked away for too long. I was lonely, Adrian. So lonely it scared me, and you were the only person who saw me even when I did not want to be seen. Every late-night conversation felt like you were pulling me back to the surface when I was drowning. I wiped another tear, but I also felt guilty because I wanted those conversations. I looked forward to them. I relied on them, and I hated myself for it. His expression softened painfully. Do not hate yourself for wanting connection. It is human. I laughed shakily. I was afraid that I was reading everything wrong, that you were just being kind, or mentoring me, or trying to keep me motivated. I was afraid of looking foolish. You were never foolish, he said quickly. You were brave. You opened pieces of yourself I was too afraid to share. My voice dropped. But you hurt me. He nodded, eyes shining. I know. And if you choose to walk away after tonight, I will never blame you. But I needed you to hear the truth before you made that decision. Silence wrapped around us thicker than the rain outside. Finally, he whispered the words he had carried all night. "I care about you, Maeve. Not as a colleague, not as an employee. As a man who fell in love with someone who deserved better than the world she was trapped in." My breath hitched. Adrian added gently, "You do not have to love me back. I just need you to know my heart was never cold. It was just scared." I looked at him through tears, feeling the pieces inside me shift painfully into something new, something fragile and real. "Adrian," I whispered, voice breaking, "I do not know what comes next." He smiled softly, sad and hopeful all at once. "Then we will take it one step at a time. No pressure, no expectations, just truth." The rain outside eased into a calm drizzle, and for the first time in months, something inside me exhaled. The morning after Adrian's confession did not arrive with fireworks or dramatic revelations. It came quietly, with the gray Portland light slipping through my blinds and the faint sound of cars moving along the wet street. I woke with puffy eyes, an aching chest, and a head full of questions that felt too heavy to lift. Adrian had left sometime after midnight, only after making sure I was truly all right, only after repeating that he did not expect anything from me, not forgiveness, not agreement, not a decision. Just honesty, just space, just time. 3 things no one in my life had offered me in a long while. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone. A single unread message waited there. "Take the time you need. I am here when you are ready. No pressure. A." My eyes stung. It was not romantic. It was not possessive. It was simply gentle. And I had forgotten what gentleness felt like, and the next week unfolded in a strange limbo. I did not return to Helion. I did not answer any work messages. I did not open my laptop except to send my formal exit papers. Instead, I rested. I slept. I cooked real meals. I took long walks by the river with no destination. I read books that had been gathering dust on my shelf. I breathed without rushing. And slowly, very slowly, my mind began to clear enough for me to see what I wanted. I wanted purpose again. I wanted stability. I wanted to build something from the pieces of myself that had survived the pressure. But most surprising of all, I wanted a future that did not revolve around fear. On the 8th morning, my phone rang. Adrian. I inhaled shakily before answering. "Hi," he said quietly, as if afraid his voice alone might overwhelm me. "I hope I am not interrupting anything." "You are not," I replied. I listened as he exhaled in relief. "There is something I would like to share with you if you are open to it," he said. "Not about us, about your work, about what comes next for you." My pulse quickened. "Okay, I am listening." He hesitated, then spoke with a careful steadiness. "I have been restructuring some things at Helion, and I want to propose something. Not a favor, not compensation. An opportunity you earned long before everything fell apart." He paused, then continued. "I want to build a new division, a human-centered lab. Independent research, no department politics, no forced timelines, no one above you who can silence your decisions. Your voice would lead the entire direction of the work." I blinked, stunned. Adrian added quickly, "If you do not want to come back, I will respect that completely. I will never ask you to return to something that harmed you. But if you choose to join this, you will not be returning to the old Helion. You will be stepping into something that exists because of you." My throat tightened. "You would really give me full autonomy." "Yes. Full control, full team choice, full creative direction. And you can say no." My mind raced. I did not want to return to the Helion that drained me. But this was not the same Helion. This was something rebuilt around the very principles I had fought for, something that could help people, something that could change the culture that had broken me in the first place, and maybe change others too. "Still," I said slowly, "if I say yes, we need boundaries. Clear ones, strong ones." I could almost hear him straighten. "Name them." "No dating for at least 3 months," I said. I need space to become myself again, not someone defined by a connection to you. Agreed, he replied immediately. You will not interfere with my decisions. Ever. Never. And I want assurance that whatever we build cannot be undermined by the same people who tried to destroy me before. You have my word and my signature, he said. My heart flickered with something warm, fragile, and hopeful. When we hung up, I sat in silence, tears filling my eyes. Not from sadness this time, but from the unfamiliar sensation of being supported without condition. 2 weeks later, the lab was officially announced, not publicly, but internally. Some executives were stunned, others confused, a few clearly threatened. But Adrian did not flinch. He stood at my side during every planning meeting, but never overshadowed me. He let me speak. He let me lead. He let me exist as someone with authority without trying to shape me into someone easier to manage. My first day back at Helion felt like stepping onto new ground. People whispered, but not cruelly. Curiosity, not gossip, filled the air. And my new team, chosen entirely by me, welcomed me with bright eyes and open notebooks. In the afternoons, I started attending therapy sessions. At first, it felt strange pulling apart the tangled threads of my burnout, my panic, my loneliness, my fear of failing. But little by little, I learned that healing did not come from strength alone. It came from softness, from patience, from facing the wounds rather than outrunning them. Adrian began his own version of healing too, though he never phrased it that way. He started delegating. He began taking evenings off. He booked a leadership coach. He called his estranged sister for the first time in 5 years. And while we kept our distance physically, our connection remained steady. Sometimes he sent short texts late at night. How is your day? Are you remembering to eat? Anything heavy weighing on you today, I kept my replies simple. Honest, calm, and never more than I could handle. He respected every boundary, every pause, every silence. One evening, he dropped by the lab not to oversee, not to question, but to listen. I was sketching out a new framework on the whiteboard when he stepped in as quietly as a shadow. You look at peace, he said. I turned to surprise to realize he was right. I am. It feels different this time. He smiled softly. Good. That is what I wanted for you. Another day, he left a small ceramic mug on my desk. Not a gift, he said, just something he found at a local pottery shop that reminded him of the color palettes I always talked about. And I smiled without realizing it. Weeks passed, then months. And healing, real healing, began settling into my bones. I was becoming someone new, someone steady, someone capable of choosing her own future. And somewhere in the middle of all this, I realized something quietly life-changing. I missed him. Not desperately, not painfully, not because I needed him to feel whole, but because I wanted him. Not the CEO, not the man who broke me, the man who tried to rebuild himself alongside me, the man who fought for my dignity before fighting for love. And by the time 3 months passed, the possibility of us felt less like a risk and more like a choice. One we could make slowly, carefully, honestly. One we could nurture without losing ourselves again. Because this time we were building not from fear, but from truth. 6 months later, Portland felt like an entirely different city. Or maybe I was the one who had changed so completely that everything around me seemed touched by new light, new meaning, new steadiness. Autumn had arrived quietly, brushing the sidewalks with golden leaves and crisp air. The mornings carried that soft coastal chill that made people walk a little faster, holding warm cups of coffee close to their chests. I loved it, every bit of it. My life no longer felt like a cycle of pressure and collapse. It felt like a rhythm finally settling into place. The Helion human-centered lab had grown into a small but powerful team of researchers, designers, and analysts, each with a bright talent that made every meeting feel alive. Together, we built something I had once only dreamed about, an ethical AI accessibility framework that companies across the industry were beginning to watch closely. For the first time in my career, I felt ownership without fear, pride without guilt, direction, without exhaustion. I taught part-time at the University of Portland, leading a seminar for graduate design students. Standing in front of a room full of curious minds energized me in ways the corporate world never had. I found joy in their questions, in their eagerness, in the spark that lit up when they solved difficult problems. Most of all, I found joy in seeing younger designers grow without being crushed by the same system that once nearly destroyed me. My therapist said healing looked different for everyone, but for me, healing looked like a morning walk to the lab with a cup of chai latte in my hands and the quiet certainty that I belonged in the world again. As for Adrian, he kept his distance while never feeling distant, a balance that surprised both of us. Our connection grew slowly, deliberately, carefully. He sent occasional late-night check-ins, though they became less frequent as we both grew healthier. He still looked tired sometimes, but no longer hollow. He spoke at leadership summits about empathetic management, something he had once scoffed at. And he changed Helion's culture from the inside out, refusing to let high pressure justify cruelty. Rumors around the office said investors had noticed the shift, that they felt a steadier, more human tone in his leadership, that they trusted him more now than before. And at the center of all that change was not romance, but respect. Mutual, honest, life-changing respect. It was early November when I realized 3 months had passed. Exactly. Which meant the boundary I had set between Adrian and me had gently lifted, and I felt ready in a way that was not impulsive or pressured or desperate, but grounded. When I told him, he simply nodded, breath catching slightly but not pushing. "What do you want to do with that time, being up?" he asked softly. I smiled. "I want to see where things go, slowly." His shoulders loosened as if someone had unfastened a weight he had carried for months. "Then slowly it will be." And it was. Coffee walks, long, gentle conversations about life and work and mistakes and hopes. Occasional dinners where he let himself laugh more freely than I had ever seen. Support that asked for nothing. Care that demanded nothing. And something else too, something neither of us named but both of us felt growing quietly like a flame sheltered between cupped hands. By the time November reached its last week, I felt ready for the moment that would close the circle of our story and open whatever came next. It happened on a cool Friday evening. I had just finished grading a stack of student projects and walked home through a calm drizzle that felt more like mist than rain. My apartment building came into view, but before I even reached the stairs, I saw a figure standing in the soft glow of the entryway lights. Adrian. He stood the same way he had on that stormy night months ago, except this time he was not shaking with fear or guilt. His shirt was dry, his hair only slightly tousled his posture steady. There was no desperation in his expression, only warmth, only something open and certain and quiet. I walked up to him and stopped a few steps away. "No storm this time," I said gently. He smiled softly. "No storm, just me hoping you would not mind company." I tilted my head amused and touched it once. "You came all the way here just to say hi." "Not exactly," he said, voice low. "I came because today marks 6 months since the IPO, since the lab's opening, since your new life, and I realized something." I waited, breath catching. "I did not lose you," he said. "I found my home." The words hit me unexpectedly, not because they were dramatic, but because they were simple, honest, unadorned. He was not claiming me. He was not asking anything of me. He was simply naming what his heart understood, and something inside me loosened completely for the first time. My voice cracked as I whispered, and I found myself. We stood there in the soft light with the city humming behind us and the faint mist settling around our shoulders. He reached out gently, hesitantly, giving me every second to pull away. I did not. Our fingers intertwined warm and steady, not trembling, not uncertain, just right, just enough. His thumb brushed lightly against my hand, and I felt a quiet future unfold in that small gesture, not grand, not sweeping, but real. We did not kiss. We did not rush toward anything that would break the fragile beauty of the moment. Instead, we simply held hands and stood there, breathing the same cool air, letting the silence speak for us. After a long moment, he said softly, "Maeve, can I walk you in?" I smiled wider than I had in months. "Adrian, yes." And so we walked inside together, side by side, step by step, the door closing gently behind us, not like a storm shutting out the world, but like the beginning of something warm, steady, and finally ours. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If you are reading these final lines, it means something in Maeve's journey and Adrian's quiet transformation touched you, stayed with you, or reminded you of something true in your own life. Maybe it was the feeling of being overwhelmed by work until you forget who you are. Maybe it was the unexpected kindness that arrives just when you think you are invisible. Maybe it was the slow, patient rebuilding of trust after heartbreak. Or maybe it was simply witnessing two people who refused to give up on themselves and on each other. Stories like this one are not just fiction. They mirror the quiet battles so many people face every day. The pressure, the fear of not being enough, the longing to be seen, the courage to start again. And if any part of their journey resonated with you even a little, I hope you carry that spark with you into tomorrow, knowing that healing is possible, connection is possible, and beginnings can happen when you least expect them. If you enjoyed this story, it would mean the world to me if you could take just a moment to support the channel. A simple like helps the video reach more people who might need a story like this today. Leaving a comment, even a short one, tells the algorithm that this mattered to you and helps our little storytelling community grow stronger. And if you want more long-form emotional stories just like this, ones filled with romance, healing, slow-burn tension, and characters who feel real, then be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. I release new stories every week, each crafted with heart cinematic detail and emotional undulation to bring you fully into the world of the characters. If you are comfortable sharing, I would love for you to drop a comment telling me where you are watching from. It is one of my favorite parts of posting these stories, seeing people from all over the United States and all around the world gathering in one place to experience something together. Portland, Seattle, New York, Houston, Chicago, Atlanta, London, Sydney, Manila, Nairobi. Wherever you are reading or listening from, thank you for letting me be part of your day. And finally, here is a question for you. The same kind of question I love asking at the end of every story. If someone showed up at your door in the rain asking for one last chance, would you open the door? Why or why not? I cannot wait to read your thoughts, your reflections, your experiences. Your voice helps shape the future of this channel, and I am grateful for every single person who takes the time to respond. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for believing in stories. And thank you for choosing to spend these minutes of your life with Maeve and Adrian. Until the next story, take care of yourself and the people you love.